I wasn't supposed to notice her. Not like that. She was just another customer, another voice asking if the order was ready, standing a little too close to the counter because the bell on the door hadn't stopped ringing all morning. But then she spoke. Low, even, like she'd learned how to make people listen without raising her voice. And I forgot what she'd asked. The shop smelled like metal and oil, faintly sweet from the rag I'd used to wipe down the counter. Ceiling fan rattling, fluorescent light flickering. I'd been here since 7, fixing the same old carburetor 3 times, because the owner swore it used to sound different. I was halfway through pretending to care when she came in. Beige coat, hair tied back like she didn't want to be noticed, but that kind of not wanting is what made everyone look twice. She asked if I could look at her car. A soft misfire, she said. It sounds tired. The way she said it, like she wasn't talking about the car, caught me off guard. I wiped my hands on the rag. Bring it around. When she did, the sound wasn't tired. It was precise, rhythmic, almost apologetic, like it was trying not to make trouble. I listened, leaned closer to the hood, pretending to focus on the sound so I didn't have to meet her eyes again. You hear it? She asked. Maybe, I said. Hard to tell with the fan on. It wasn't. I heard everything. The faint rattle of her keys, the slight catch in her breath when I got too close to the driver's side window. She stood there, half-shadowed by the morning light cutting through the garage door, watching me work with that still, assessing gaze that made me feel like I was the one being inspected. She told me her name after a while, Elena. Said she'd just moved back to town, that she used to come here with her husband years ago. Her tone didn't invite follow-up questions, and I didn't ask. Still, I noticed the way her fingers lingered on the ring-shaped mark on her hand. No ring, just the habit left behind. We spoke about small things, gas prices, whether that wouldn't make up its mind, but under it all, something heavier hung between us. Not flirtation. Not yet. Just an awareness that shouldn't have been there. Every word seemed to balance on it. At one point, I reached for the hood latch just as she stepped forward. My hand brushed her wrist, a second, maybe less. Warm skin, light pulse. She didn't pull back. Not immediately. Just a glance, sharp, unreadable. Then she stepped aside, folding her arms, pretending to study the walls cluttered with spare parts. The silence after that was thick, the kind that fills the room when neither person wants to break it first. I told her the engine would be fine, probably just a clogged injector. She nodded, thanked me, then added, You're new here, aren't you? Couple months. She smiled a little. You don't talk much. Neither do you, I said. That got me a look, small, amused, but distant. Like she hadn't decided whether I'd said something brave or stupid. She left soon after, the sound of her heels soft against the concrete, fading with the hum of her car as she drove off. I went back to work. Tried to. But the smell of her perfume, faint citrus, maybe orange blossom, stayed longer than it should have. By closing time, I was still thinking about the way she'd looked at me before leaving. Not like a customer. Not like anything I could name. Just enough to make me wonder if she knew how close she'd stood, or if she'd done it on purpose. She came back 3 days later. I knew it was her before she even stepped out of the car, that same low hum of the engine, careful like it didn't want to draw attention. I tried to play it off, stay busy under the hood of a pickup that didn't need fixing. Still tired? I asked when she walked in. Her eyes flicked to me, unreadable, sharp for a second before softening. Guess it just doesn't like sitting still. Neither do you, I wanted to say, but didn't. She leaned against the counter, flipping through the smudged clipboard like she needed something to do with her hands. Her nails were short, clean, the kind that belonged to someone who did things herself. There was a small scar on her wrist, faint, pale, that she tried to hide when she noticed me noticing. You have time to take another look? She asked. I did, but I waited a beat too long before saying yes, just so it wouldn't sound like I'd been waiting for her. While I worked, she stood nearby, watching. Not in the impatient way most customers did, more like she was somewhere else entirely. There was a weight behind her silence that made me want to ask things I had no right to. After a while, she spoke. You remind me of someone, she said. I looked up. Good someone or bad someone? She smiled faintly. Someone who used to listen. The words hung there, quiet, almost fragile. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where sunlight caught the dust floating in the air. The kind of moment that should have passed unnoticed, but didn't. I tightened a bolt that didn't need tightening. He stopped listening? She didn't answer, just wrapped her arms around herself, even though it wasn't cold. I caught the smallest tremor in her fingers, gone before I could be sure. She changed the subject after that. Asked about the shop, if I liked working here. I told her I did, mostly. She nodded, distracted, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The gesture too practiced, too deliberate, like it kept her from saying something else. When I started the car, she flinched at the sound, barely, but enough to notice. I turned it off again. You okay? She smiled, too quickly. Just not used to noise lately. There was something in that, something about empty rooms or things left unsaid, but I didn't push. She thanked me again, her voice quieter this time, softer at the edges. Then she hesitated. Not the kind of hesitation that comes from doubt. More like a pause before doing something she knew she shouldn't. You've got a steady way about you, she said, eyes on the ground. It's rare. Before I could respond, she turned, pulling her coat tighter around her. And when she left, I noticed she'd forgotten her gloves on the counter. Small, worn leather ones, the lining faintly perfumed. I could have called after her, but I didn't. I just stood there, holding them, thinking about her voice when she said someone who used to listen. It rained that evening, not the loud kind, just steady, whispering against the windows of the garage as if it wanted to be let in. I was closing up when her headlights slid across the wall. She didn't honk, just waited, engine idling, like she wasn't sure she should be here. I stepped out under the awning, pulling my jacket tighter. You're late for an appointment that doesn't exist. She smiled, barely. I was driving past. The light was on. I nodded, pretending that made sense. Car trouble again. Maybe I just needed to see if it was really raining, she said. Her voice carried a kind of quiet exhaustion, the kind that doesn't come from a long day, but from a long few years. I unlocked the door and let her in, mostly because I didn't know how to tell her no. The smell of oil and rain filled the space. She shook out her umbrella, water pooling near the door. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I made coffee, the bad kind we kept for emergencies, and poured her a cup. She wrapped her hands around it like it was warmth itself. You live alone? She asked, not looking up. Yeah, you. She smiled into the steam. That's complicated. Her phone buzzed on the counter before I could say anything else. She turned it over quickly, screen down. A faint light pulsed beneath her hand. I caught a glimpse of a name she didn't want me to see, Daniel. Her fingers trembled slightly before she slid the phone into her coat pocket. Old friend, she said too quickly. Didn't ask, I said. I know. The air thickened. I could hear the hum of the vending machine in the corner, the tick of the clock above the door. She took a sip, then set the mug down carefully, aligning it with the grain of the wood. You ever wish you hadn't said something? She asked quietly. All the time. She looked up then, really looked, the kind of look that pins you where you stand. And if you did, I'd probably mean it more than I should. Her lips parted slightly, like she might respond, but the words didn't come. Instead, she exhaled through her nose, slow and shaky. I shouldn't be here, she said finally. Probably not. She nodded, but didn't move. The rain grew louder, the kind that fills silence like static. I could see the reflection of her face in the window. Tired, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with looks. She reached for her umbrella, then stopped. Her hand brushed mine. Light, deliberate, but not an accident. A pause. Long enough for something to happen. But then her phone buzzed again. She flinched, stepped back. Good night, she whispered, voice caught between apology and something else. And before I could say anything, or worse, mean something I shouldn't, she was gone, leaving the door half open and the smell of rain still clinging to her coffee mug. The next week, she didn't come. Not once. No rain, no quiet visits, no coffee cooling between us. I told myself it was better that way, easier to breathe, to sleep, to not wait for headlights that might never turn in. But the lie didn't hold. Every sound of the door made me look up too fast. When she finally did appear again, it was late, the shop almost dark, a gray evening spilling through the half-open door. She didn't say hello, just walked in and leaned against the counter like she used to. Her coat was damp, hair falling loose, face pale in the harsh fluorescent light. You shouldn't be here this late, I said, wiping my hands on a rag just to have something to do. I couldn't sleep, she murmured. Drove for an hour. Ended up here. Something in her voice made me stop. It wasn't fragile. It was stripped, like she'd used up everything she had to just stand there. I turned off the wrench light. The room dimmed, softer. Do you want to talk about it? No, she said. Then, quieter. But maybe I should. She stepped closer, the click of her heels slow and uneven. I keep thinking if I come here, I can remember who I used to be. But then you look at me like that, and She stopped, looking down. I don't know what I'm doing. Her words hung in the air, trembling a little. I swallowed, the metal taste of something unspoken in the back of my throat. You're not the only one. She looked up sharply. Then what is this? I shook my head. I don't know. You tell me. The silence stretched between us, full and heavy. She folded her arms, then dropped them again, restless, uncertain. I'm not supposed to be here, she said, more to herself. I keep promising I won't come back. But then I do. Maybe that means something, I said. Her laugh was short, cracked. Or maybe it means I'm just lonely. That word, lonely, filled the room like smoke. It clung to everything. I don't want to make this harder for you, I said. Whatever this is. She stepped closer. I could see the faint lines near her mouth, the way her breath trembled. You already have, she whispered. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The sound of the clock on the wall filled the space, each tick louder than it should have been. I wanted to reach for her. I didn't. She wanted to leave. She didn't. Instead, she said, you make me feel like I'm standing somewhere I shouldn't be, but I can't move. Her eyes were wet, though no tears fell. And before I could answer, she turned toward the door, hand on the frame, her voice barely audible. I don't even know if I miss you yet, she said. But I'm already scared I will. She came by on a Sunday, a day the shop was closed. I heard the soft knock before I saw her face through the glass, pale against the afternoon sun. I thought about pretending not to be there, but something in the way she waited, still, patient, like she already knew I would open the door, made it impossible. You shouldn't keep finding reasons to come here, I said. I didn't, she replied. This time, I just didn't drive anywhere else. There was something in her tone, quiet, stripped bare of pretense. She stepped inside, holding something small in her hand, a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges. I found this last night, she said, setting it on the counter. I thought I'd thrown it away years ago. It was a photo, not a letter. A man stood beside her, younger, smiling with that easy confidence people have before life rearranges them. She looked different too, hair shorter, eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen yet. My husband, she said simply. Or he was. I nodded slowly. You don't have to. I do, she interrupted. He died 6 years ago. Heart attack. Out of nowhere. We'd just had an argument that morning, about something stupid. He left for work, and I never saw him again. The words weren't practiced. They came out like a confession she hadn't planned to make. I didn't say anything. What could I say? The only sound was the hum of the old fridge in the corner. She laughed, but it broke halfway through. You remind me of him sometimes. Not in how you talk, you barely do, but in how you stay. Even when I'm difficult. Her eyes met mine, steady, unguarded in a way they'd never been before. That's why I keep coming back. It's not fair to you. But I can't seem to stop. The floor seemed to tilt a little beneath me. I wanted to tell her she didn't need to explain, that I understood. But I didn't. I just nodded, pretending to fix my attention on the photo so I wouldn't have to meet her gaze. She leaned against the counter, brushing her fingers over the paper. He used to fix things too, she said softly. Always said it was easier than fixing people. I managed a half smile. He wasn't wrong. No, she murmured. But maybe some people are worth trying for. She said it like she didn't mean me, but she did not mean me, either. Then she slid the photo toward me. Keep it, she said. I can't. You already have, she whispered. And before I could respond, she turned and walked out, sunlight spilling in around her, catching the dust in the air, leaving the photo on the counter, face down. When I finally turned it over, there was something written on the back, in faded ink. He never stopped listening. I stood there for a long time, the hum of the fridge the only sound, realizing she hadn't come to remember him. She'd come to stop forgetting. She didn't come for almost 2 weeks after that. The photo stayed where she'd left it, beside the coffee maker, the edges curling slightly from the heat. I didn't move it. I told myself I was giving her space, but I knew better. I was giving myself time to pretend I wasn't waiting. When she finally walked in, she didn't look like someone who needed fixing. She looked like someone who decided to stop pretending she didn't. Still open? She asked softly. Always seems to be for you. A small smile flickered, tired but real. She crossed the room slowly, her heels echoing against the concrete. There were faint shadows under her eyes, not from lack of sleep, but from carrying something too long. I shouldn't have left it here, she said, glancing at the photo. Then why did you? She hesitated. Because part of me hoped you'd understand what I couldn't say. I didn't answer. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore, just full, like the air before rain. She stepped closer until the faint smell of her perfume reached me again, orange blossom, barely there. She looked around the shop, her gaze catching on the smallest things. The cracked clock, the half-fixed carburetor, the gloves she'd forgotten weeks ago still folded neatly beside the register. You kept them, she said quietly. Didn't know where to return them. Her eyes softened. You could have asked. I was afraid you'd stop coming. That landed between us like a truth neither of us wanted to hold, but both already had. She reached out then, fingers brushing the counter, then my hand. Light, uncertain. Do you ever think, she said, that maybe the wrong timing is still timing? I turned my hand over, palm up. She didn't pull away. We stood like that for a long while. Nothing said, nothing needed. Outside, the world kept moving. The hiss of passing cars, a dog barking somewhere distant, the fading hum of daylight. I don't know what this is, she whispered. And I don't know what it should be. I don't either, I said. But it doesn't feel wrong. She nodded slowly. No, it doesn't. Her eyes glistened. Not tears exactly, just the soft wetness that comes with letting go. She stepped closer until our shoulders almost touched. I could feel the warmth of her breath when she exhaled, unsteady but steadying me. We didn't kiss. Didn't need to. The moment itself was enough. The way her hand tightened in mine. The faint tremor in her fingers easing as she leaned her forehead gently against my shoulder. No words, no explanations. Just two people who had run out of reasons to pretend they hadn't been waiting for this. The clock ticked behind us, a soft reminder that time was still moving, even if we weren't. When she finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. Maybe this is what listening sounds like. And I didn't say anything. I just stayed still, letting the quiet answer for both of us. It's been months since that night in the shop. The photo still sits by the coffee maker. I never put it away. The edges have yellowed a little more, but I guess that's what happens to anything you leave out long enough. It stops being a memory and becomes part of the place. She still comes by sometimes. Never at the same hour twice. Sometimes it's just for a tune-up or a coffee that goes cold before either of us drinks it. Sometimes she doesn't say much at all, just sits on the edge of the counter, legs crossed, eyes following the slow turn of the ceiling fan like she's listening to something only she can hear. We don't talk about what we are. Maybe we don't need to. There's a quiet agreement in the air now that what we have doesn't need naming to be real. That not every connection is meant to be loud or permanent. Some just arrive, settle in, and make you softer. I think about the first time she came in, the tired sound of her engine, the way she said it felt tired. I didn't realize then she was talking about herself. Maybe I was too. Two people running on fumes, hoping someone might listen long enough to tell them it was okay to stop pretending everything was fine. She told me once, I keep waiting for this to make sense. I told her maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe the point wasn't to fix what broke before, but to learn how to hold what's still left. And in a way, she taught me that. Not through grand gestures or confessions, just through presence. Through the way she'd pause before leaving, hand resting on the doorframe, like she needed the silence between us to steady her again. I've stopped counting the days between her visits. There's a kind of peace in that, knowing something doesn't need to be constant to be meaningful. Sometimes I still hear the rain against the windows at closing time, and I'll find myself expecting her headlights to slide across the wall. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But the waiting feels different now. Quieter, full instead of empty. If you told me back then that someone could change me without ever asking to, I wouldn't have believed it. But she did, not by loving me out loud, but by showing me that silence can hold more truth than words ever could. Maybe that's what love really is. Not the noise, not the declarations, but the gentle pull that makes you look up when the door opens, even when you tell yourself you're not waiting. And maybe that's enough. If you've ever had someone like that, someone who changed the shape of your days without meaning to, you'll understand. Tell me, in the comments, would you have opened the door, too?